stillness where echoes meet, the past whispers and dreams repeat. A gentle hand, a guiding light in the shadows, we'll find our sight. Remember the path of old, shadows woven and stories told. For I am God.
Welcome, I'm Farrell.
And I'm Rhonda Pickering.
And we're happy to be here today. And you know, once in a while, just to do us a favor, before you get going, if you've liked what we do, why don't you go ahead and just click that like button and then subscribe, and then it'll give us a lot of boost.
Share it with your friends.
Yeah, and share it with your friends. That'd be awesome. Today, we're just really grateful to pick up on the life of Abraham and how beautiful of an example he is of the Father. And the covenant process is what we have entitled this one. This is Genesis 12 through 17 and Abraham 1 and 2. And we're going to scoot just a little bit into the future lessons, because, particularly the next one, just because we want to tie it all together a little bit. Anyway, but before we get going too far in other directions, I wanted to just show you how wonderful the information that we can get in our day is, where we can actually find things we could never find in the past with Daniel 12:4, where it says knowledge will be increased. Well, knowledge is really being increased, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, but mostly it's a good thing for those of us who love the Lord and love the scriptures. So we're going to start right off with dating the birth of Abraham.
In the Book of Jasher.
In the Book of Jasher. And we're going to start with this whole idea that is in the Book of Jasher. And it was the night that Abraham was born that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurors came and ate and drank at the house of Terah. And they rejoiced with him on that night. So on the night he was born, when they had his birth, they kind of threw a party. The wise men came and everybody, party maybe it's a little extreme, but they threw a get-together. And they were...
Actually, it was a celebration.
That's what I mean. This celebration is probably a better word than party in modern connotations. But anyway, so they got together with a celebration to celebrate the birth of Abraham. And when the wise men and the conjurors went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward the heaven that night and looked at the stars, and they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens and swallowed up the four stars and from the four sides of heaven. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurors were astonished at the sight. And the sages understood the matter, and they knew its import. And they said to each other, "This is a betoken that the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be faithful and multiply and possess the earth, he and his children forever, he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands." So that's quite the statement that even the wise men of the day were speaking of Abraham.
They're saying that because the planet is gobbling up the other planets. So this is their interpretation.
You're still in my punchline here. Anyway, so we're gonna zoom right into this statement here. One very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and he swallowed up the four stars from the four sides of heaven. That's what we're going to look at for just a minute. Do you realize that with modern astronomical software, we're in a position where we
can go back to the birth of Abraham.
We can, if we can find that.
Actually, it was Abram. He doesn't get to be Abraham until chapter 17. But, we're probably going to mess that up, so just go with this.
Anyway, so what do you think the possibilities, and you're going to say, well, obviously you found her, else you wouldn't be talking about it. But what do you think the possibilities we could actually show that event? Isn't that just an interesting thought?
And would it be an uncommon event?
So we're going to go into astronomical software. We use Starry Night Pro because we love it. And we're going to show what actually happened at the birth of Abraham. If you notice, Venus is descending towards the other stars, and it's coming down towards 4 other stars, or in this instance, wandering stars, which are planets. And the brightness of Venus overtakes them that night of Abraham's birth. And they see this sign, and they know it's prophetic import. So isn't that amazing that we can actually visualize an event of Abraham's birth? That is just pretty cool. And when we discovered this, it actually wasn't our discovery. We discovered another guy's research that showed this, and we were just so fascinated with it. And it's so fun that I actually set up the program to show that timeline in the heavens.
So Bob Wadsworth was the one that discovered this, and what is amazing is what you just saw. That was not something we animated or did. This is straight video footage of 1953 BC
playing out on an astronomical program.
That we're watching what the wise men saw when Abram was born, according to the record that is in the Book of Jasher.
Now, we can't 100% guarantee that this was the event, although I would give it a high probability that it was the event because of the way it lays out. I mean, there could be...
How often have we seen Jupiter go,
all of these planets swallowed up in the light of Venus.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an incredible
And it's
thing.
amazing that in one verse they can nail a point in time 4,000 years ago.
The fact that it was written in Jasher, kind of for our benefit, is just really cool. The whole idea that we could actually witness this event. So I would give us, a 90 to 95% chance that's when Abraham was born.
Right. It's birthday, February.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I just wanted to share that with you. And later on, we'll maybe connect some more dots of what that information gives us about the life of Abraham, but more particularly, the cycle of the earth is really cool. Right. Based on that, I'm going to let you take it for...
We're going to kind of just take it from his birth and move on to... before we go into a little bit of what's happening in the life of Abraham, we're going to make it clear a little bit about his family tree. So what you see here is a chart from the Institute Manual, Volume 1, and it is showing that Abram is the son of Terah, who is the son of Shem, who is the son of Noah. And, we have of all of the prophets that the ancient patriarchs, we probably have more apocryphal extracurricular information about Abraham than we do of anybody else. We have the Apocalypse of Abraham. We have the Testament of Abraham. We have the Genesis Apocryphon. We have so many sources, the Book of Jasher, the Book of Josephus, and all of these records, these ancient records, shed light on the life of Abraham. Of course, Doctrine and Covenants 91 says that anytime we're looking at scripture or ancient records that aren't canonized, we are going to be careful to have the Spirit of the Lord. But that if we do, we can sort things out and they can be of great benefit to us. So we don't ever want to present apocryphal information as, the same category as scripture. But it does give us fascinating insight to many, many stories that are just kind of cryptic, a little bit until...
I wanted to jump. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off, but as soon as you're done, I just wanted to point out to you that based on the chronology of these patriarchs, that Shem is still alive in Abraham's life.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Which is really cool to note. So
Absolutely.
We're really only one generation with Abraham. I say one generation, that's technically not true, but the one generation, the generation of the flood, is still alive, some of them.
Right. And they're still having long age spans at this point. They're decreasing.
Yeah, decreasing.
But they're still long compared to our lifespans today. And many, many of these individuals are contemporary with each other. But one of the things that I wanted to clear up kind of right out of the gate is we know that at different points in Abraham's life, he's going to introduce Sarah, his wife, as his sister. And so we wanted to take a look at that really quickly. In the book of Jasher, it's very clear that Sarah, or Sarai in the beginning, is the daughter of Haran. And I think it's very fascinating here that that was verified in the Times and Seasons. And so that's why here it is in the Institute manual this way. I've heard several different scholars show that in different ways, but it helps to go to the book of Jasher and look at a little bit of the age spans that we're dealing with here. So Terah has 3 sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran is actually a lot older than Abraham.
He's actually the firstborn.
He's the firstborn.
And thus we get the timing of births off a little on the age of Abraham.
Exactly. I'm about to show you those numbers here. So let's go to Genesis in chapter 20, and we're going to get this explanation that Abraham is giving with Abimelech of the fact that he had introduced Sarah as his sister. And Abraham said, because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And that, of course, was very the thing that they did. And so this was a critical situation. And yet, indeed, she is my sister. So how can she be? I mean, if she's Haran's daughter, then that would make her his niece. But he's introducing her as his sister. And this is where it gets fascinating. It says that she is the daughter or the granddaughter of Terah, his father, but he is not the daughter. She is not the daughter of his mother. And so how does that work? Well, if you go to the book of Jasher, it tells you that Terah took a wife, and her name was Amthello, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. And Terah was 70 years old when Abram was born. And obviously this Amthello, mother of Abraham, was an important woman, because they're having this huge celebration the night that the wise men see this sign in the heavens. And they actually tell Nimrod, who is the king at this time, and Nimrod is actually threatened by the birth of Abraham and this sign in the heavens, because remember it said because of the planet gobbles it up, that Nimrod is threatened that Abraham is going to destroy his kingdom. And so he commands Terah.
Seems like a reoccurring pattern.
Yeah,
Farrell and Moses.
Right.
You know.
And this is going to be the case all throughout the life of Abraham. There is going to be this competition for authority between the Pharaoh and Abraham, clear from the time he's born. Okay? And so Nimrod is going to require Terah, who is his chief captain. Actually, Terah, according to the book of Jasher, has helped Nimrod in his rise to power. He has battled with him. He's one of his chief officers, and Terah has given him a high position in the kingdom, which is one of the reasons that this birth of Abraham is celebrated. So he's 70 years old when Abraham is born, and Terah called the name of his son Abraham. And then the point that I wanted to bring out as well here is that his brother Haran is 32 years older than he is. Okay, so that's why Haran's daughter Sarai is going to be about the same age as Abraham. Actually, she's 10 years younger than Abraham. So this is kind of just to help you see this family tree a little bit and what's going on. Now Haran, according to the Pearl of Great Price in the book of Abraham, is going to die in a famine in Ur before Abraham and his father Terah and the family ever leave the land of Babylon. And so Lot, his son, let's go back to that family tree there. Haran has 4 children. He has Milcah, Lot, Iscah, and Sarai. And these 4 children are going to be adopted by Terah when they
is why
when Haran dies. Okay,
she becomes...
And then also when Abraham in chapter 20 in Genesis says that she is my sister.
So basically, Terah takes on Haran's family as his own.
Right. And he is a sister from a different mother. That just means that Haran's mother is not Amphelo, because Terah was very, very high in the kingdom and he had a large family as well. Okay, he doesn't marry Abraham's mother until his older age. At least we would consider it older, but of course they lived longer then. But anyway, that will just help clear up a little bit of the situation with the family of Haran. And, you know, they're going to be heartbroken that Haran has died and that his family Nahor is going to marry one of Haran's daughters, Milcah, and then Abraham is going to marry Sarai, and then he's going to take care of Lot, who is going to go with Abraham. So you can see that the family is pulling together to take care of Haran's kids. They're actually going to name the first place they settle Haran. So here is a little bit of a map of the life of Abraham. What I have done here is I've gone through the book of Josephus, the book of Jasher, the Genesis, and everything, and tried to kind of combine when all of the covenants that God makes with Abraham are made with him, so that you can kind of see it in the map on a journey. So you can see that down in or in the Chaldea or Babylon, where Abraham kind of starts off. I think it's fascinating that in Abraham chapter 3, when he is giving us that astronomy lesson about Kolob and everything, is so cool with the Hypocephalus, facsimile number 2 there. He says that God gave him the Urim and Thummim.
So, don't break your thought.
Okay.
I don't want to distract you. But so my interest in astronomy came from Abraham.
That's it.
You know, I got good
That's
company,
it.
right?
So in Abraham chapter 3, I think it's verse 1, it's right there on the screen. It says that God gave him the Urim and Thummim clear back in Ur. So I don't know if this is because Abraham at that time gets saved from the sacrifice, and the priest of Elkanah dies instead of Abraham, and so the Pharaoh or Nimrod at this time no longer needs Abraham to die, because the priest of Elkanah died instead. And it's so miraculous that he has been saved, according to the Book of Jasher. He's given gifts and everything, and he's honored in the kingdom until Nimrod gets threatened by him again. And then, it's time for him to get out of Dodge. And he's going to have to move to up to Haran is where they will go from there. And Abraham will take his father with him. But there are a couple of other things that we need to mention that are in Babylon before they leave. Terah makes idols. You remember that story?
Yeah.
And he has one different statue. As a matter of fact, the apocryphal writings say that Nimrod was the first one to introduce the worship of idols of wood and stone. Okay, and so
substitutional worship.
Yeah, so Terah has made idols for one guy that's the god of each month. So he's got 12 different idols there. And when Abraham gets back to Ur from actually hanging out with Noah and Shem, which we'll read in just a minute, when he gets back and sees that his dad is worshiping idols of wood and stone, he's really upset. And so he goes in there with a hatchet and he destroys all of his. And this, it infuriates Terah. And Terah wants justice. So he goes to Nimrod and he says, you need to do something. You need to get Abraham in here and have him answer for what he did. And so, by the way, Abraham, he only destroys 11 of the statues. He
leaves the big one.
Puts the hatchet in the big one's hands, okay? And so, whether this story is, 100% accurate or not, it is not the point. The point that we're trying to make here is that Abraham is always going to be trying to get people to understand who God is. And he's reasoning from the time he's young. And he's alone. I mean, his father worships idols. He's in a kingdom full of idolatry. And
what a
he
miracle.
is such a marvelous character that he will, on his own, seek God, seek truth. And so he,
in a
knowing,
society that does not.
right. And he knows he's going to get in
resembles-
big trouble. I mean, this is actually, he's putting his life on the line and he knows it. But this is his opportunity to get to go before Nimrod. And so Nimrod calls him in with all of his counselors and he says, look what you've done to your father's livelihood. Look, and Abraham says, the big one did it.
Yeah.
Okay? And Nimrod, of course, says that is not possible, that the big one could do it. It couldn't destroy all the others. And so Abraham turns to Nimrod and he says, if you know that he is not capable of doing this, then why are you worshiping him? And why are you teaching your people to follow in such wickedness? Okay, so... And of course, Abraham gets thrown in prison, and, they decide that, hey, if you'd just been rude to the king, you would just get hanged. But because you were defiant to the king, then your death has to be a whole lot more painful than that and everything. And so then we have the whole offering of Abraham as a sacrifice that we have in facsimile number 1 in the Book of Abraham and the Pearl of Great Price. And then, of course, we have a different angle on the story in the Book of Jasher. I like what Hugh Nibley points out, and he points out that in the Book of Jasher, he gets thrown into a fire, but in the Book of Abraham, we have him being offered on the altar. And, Hugh Nibley is like, well, of course, there was always a fire with an offering. I mean, even within the Akedah, the offering of Isaac, you have Isaac carrying the wood up the hill for the offering, because there's always a fire associated with it. So, sometimes with these apocryphal stories, you just kind of have to piece it together and try and kind of figure it out. But the point is that Abraham was faithful in his ministry and his preaching of God to the people, even when he was alone, and even when it would cost him put his life at risk. Okay, so, and that's important, because when he gets up to Haran, that's when we're going to get the first promises to Abraham. And the point that we're trying to make here is that these covenants don't just come out of the blue. They are always preceded by a test and a trial.
The covenant process.
And faithfulness in the covenant process, okay? So that's why you see a number 1 up there, is that's the first time that the covenant of the Abrahamic covenant is what we call it, with the blessings, which we'll go over in a minute, is made to Abraham, is up in Haran. Now, and of course, again, we are saying Abraham because it's too hard to only say Abraham before you get to Genesis 17. So.
Well, because we think of him as final.
I know, because we're looking back in time. But anyway, so Abraham at this point is going to be commanded by the Lord that he is to leave Haran and he's to go down into the land of Canaan. Now, one of the things to remember at this point too is that, in the Pearl of Great Price, we're told that Haran dies from the famine in Babylon. This is a time of world upheaval. And we know this because, Sodom and Gomorrah is, just a few chapters later, and you've got...
Yeah, I find it fascinating that there's so much going on
earthquakes
simultaneously with Abraham.
Yeah.
I mean, we basically just come out of...
You have all this silence of all these 10
flood.
generations, and then all of a sudden, Abraham, we have all this information.
You think about that, and the earth definitely has not always been as stable as we make it
Exactly.
seem because you've got all the upheaval of the flood, that the water actually came forth, not just from as rain, but came forth out of the deep.
And it's unstable.
And the whole place is still quite unstable.
And all of Abraham's life, he will be moving and moving because of the famine. And when he goes down to Egypt, it's because in Canaan, the famine
Catastrophic change.
was very grievous. And so he's going to be dealing with, in their world, a worldwide famine his whole life, which is amazing. We'll get to that with the 10 trials of Abraham. So we're going to have him go ahead and come around the Fertile Crescent, and he's going to move south. And the first place that we learn of in the Book of Abraham that he stops is Jasher. And there are apocryphal and ancient documents that have actually verified that Abraham was king in Damascus. And so there's some scholars that believe that Jasher was in Damascus because he would have stayed there for a long period of time. So you've got Abraham, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it all night, all night long. We've got Abraham leaving Haran, and then when he's 62, and he is not going to go down and be in Bethel until he's 75. So how many years is it going to take him? 62
13 years.
It's about 13 years. So this isn't, just like take your backpack and hike all the way around and we're beelining it. No, this is years that he's taking as he makes these journeys through Genesis. And then he is going to head down, and then when he gets to Shechem, he is going to be given the second covenant. And so what we have here is that the first covenant was made after he proved his faithfulness in the ministry, testifying before Nimrod in Babylon at the risk of his life. And then when he leaves Haran, we're told that he takes over 300 converts with him when he leaves Haran. So he is a preacher of righteousness. And these covenants are made with him according to his faithfulness. Now, when he arrives in Shechem, which is kind of the gateway to Israel, to the promised land, coming down from the north here, this is where he is going to have the covenant reestablished with him because of his faithfulness in obeying the Lord and coming down to Canaan. And throughout all of this, he's going to keep being told that he's going to inherit the land. But yet, his whole life, he's wandering from place to place to place. And so it is so beautiful that Abraham, and this is actually the first mention of the word in the Bible, is that, and Abraham believed God. He believed the promises that God made to him, even though in his whole lifetime he didn't see his posterity inherit the land. Clear up till when Sarah dies and he has to buy a plot of land from the people that he's living with so that he can bury Sarah. So
in a sense,
father of the faithful.
Yeah, father of the faithful, but I was going to say he's definitely an example of someone who completely consecrated everything to the work of the Lord.
Right.
He didn't worry so much about other things, which is quite the example, really.
Of course, we know from the offering of Isaac and everything that Abraham is going to be a type of the father. And in a way, you can look at the life of Abraham and you can see that Heavenly Father is saying that his kingdom is not this world. Jesus says that. My kingdom is not of this world. And in that sense, Abraham as a type of the father, his kingdom is not of this world. He will inherit it, and his posterity will be blessed, and they will inherit it. But he is a type of the Father. So we have the covenant being renewed at Shechem, and that is going to be the place, actually, that the children of Israel, when they come back in the fulfillment of all these covenant promises, and they come into the promised land, this is where Israel will enter, and this is where Israel will make what is called a covenant between the pieces, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, the third covenant will be made down in Bethel. He will have to move south again. You remember, and he's moving south again because of the famine, and this is the point where it says, and the famine became very grievous. So he's going to have to go down into Egypt because there's corn in Egypt, or grain in the Old Testament. And this is the point where God will come and he will make a covenant with him again. And we get this from the book of Abraham, where God tells him that he's giving him this big astronomy lesson that he gets in chapter 3. He's giving him that lesson and that information before he goes down into Egypt. Because for his ministry in Egypt, with Pharaoh in Egypt, he is going to have to be able to instruct them. And he is going to be respected and honored when he gets to Egypt, after they get through that issue with Sarah being his sister. Yeah. And, sometimes I think about it, Sarah being a princess, and she's a wandering vagabond most of her life. And sometimes I think we underestimate what a temptation it might have been for Sarah to be in a kingdom of plenty and be honored, and yet in every situation where she is being taken from Abraham, she is praying and pleading with God to deliver her and to not break her covenants with her husband. And Abraham is praying as well that God will protect her. And then we have all those stories in every case where there's a miraculous deliverance, which shows the pharaohs or the kings that God is real, and then they honor Abraham. And then we have facsimile number 3, where Abraham is being honored in the court of Pharaoh and teaching lessons on astronomy. And that there's been a lot of attacks on the translation of the facsimiles and everything, and I'm not even going to go into that. I find so much exciting stuff and I love them, but Book of Mormon Central has amazing stuff on the accuracy of Joseph Smith translations of some of these things, and the fallacies and the problems with the criticisms, with those people that say that they know that what they don't know. And I just would refer you to Book of Mormon Central, and they even have a Pearl of Great Price Central now too, that are giving so much good information on this.
I remember a time when I got challenged with a bunch of stuff on the facsimiles and the translation of it when we were in our Hawaii time. And I remember going to the Lord and saying, help me sort through this.
Right.
Help me to see exactly what is happening here, because I really want to understand. And I can tell you that he answered me very straight up and clearly, and that is that the future translations in Egyptian that came were actually taken from Abraham, not the other way around.
Right.
That it actually came through what he was doing, and then they created ceremonial things off of those things.
And there's that as well, but then you also have all of the perspectives of what we think that Egyptian means now and what they believed it meant then, and they do a great job of addressing all of these things. I just want to turn you on to those sources because we don't have time to go through all that at this point. So the Lord is going to appear again to Abraham and reiterate the covenants with him before he goes down into Egypt. And then what we see here is after he returns from Egypt. When he returns from Egypt, you can see number 4 right there at Bethel. This is where he and Lot are going to split up. And he is going to take the mountain on the east of Bethel. And then Lot is going to go down into the fertile valleys at south of the Dead Sea. Well, it's dead now, but he's going to head down there when it was the fertile plains, before Sodom and Gomorrah get a huge climate change. So anyway, but he's going to be up in the mountains. And again, this is a time of famine. And one of the reasons he and Lot have to separate is because there's not enough water for all of the flocks. And so Abraham is going to do the magnanimous thing here, of course. And he's going to say, Lot, you pick. You go first. And this is what you're going to see throughout the life of Abraham, with all the trials and everything that he endures and experiences. He will always be the generous, the stand for truth, the teach about God to a people who have lost their understanding of who he is. And we're going to see that this blessing that he has renewed with him is going to be after he passes that test of letting Lot pick first. Okay? And then, of course, we know in the story in Genesis that Lot's pick of the best doesn't turn out to be
so good for him,
the best pick. Right? Because in Genesis 14 you're gonna have the battle of the 9 kings, and so you're gonna have 5 of your kings or actually 4 of your kings that come from what we know today as Iran, your Persian area and your Babylon area. They're going to get a coalition, and they're going to come and they're going to attack the kings that are down in the valleys around the sea, the fertile valleys there, Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, all of the 5 cities that are there. And so they are going to conquer the 5 cities, and they're going to take Lot captive and everything. And then you're going to have Abraham, or Abram at that time. He's going to get all of his men and his allies, and they are going to go after and rescue Lot. And it's an exciting story. In the Book of Jasher, they give you a lot of more details about how he didn't let any grass grow. As soon as they took the spoils and everything, he went quickly and attacked them in a surprise attack. And he is going to take the spoils. He's going to release Lot and his family, and the king of Sodom is going to want to reward Abram with the spoils of war. And of course, we know the story that Abram is going to refuse. And so at this point, he's passing another test of his character. He's going to refuse those spoils, and he is going to say that he only wants to reward his allies with what they need, feed his men, and he's going to give 10% to Melchizedek. So this covenant that is renewed when he meets Melchizedek is after the battle of the it's actually in the 9 kings, the 4 attack the 5 and they win, and then when Abraham goes to battle with them, he conquers the 4 kings that were from Babylon and Persia up there. And it's amazing at this point that he's at the Oaks of Mamre, which is in the Negev and Hebron, where he's going to settle here. And it is here that God will make the covenant more sure with him than it has been in the past. And we'll see that each of these covenant processes are adding a little bit more to the covenant that he had before, as he proved himself more and more faithful.
It kind of is fascinating to me as I sit and think about these things, and you evaluate how much takes place because of the lifespan of like Shem and the lifespans of these people. I mean, virtually, when you look at like the history of America or the United States, and you go from 1776 and you realize that we're just barely coming up on 250 years in our lifespan, and some of these patriarchs lived all of that.
Well, Methuselah.
Yeah, but I'm even saying after the flood.
After the flood.
They even have a lot of them who spent just a great deal, so they would see so many things. And that's, I always thought, how in the world, when Shem and Noah, alive as long as they were, did they get so far off? And all you got to do is look at our history, and you realize
how far off we've come.
We've taken beautiful things and turned them into
from the pilgrims arriving on the shores with their most prized possession, their Geneva Bibles,
to our current state of affairs, and what would be a lifetime of some of these people.
Right. And they would see this process. So at this point, when Abraham goes to pay the tithes to Melchizedek, we have some very, very interesting things in Jasher, where we learn that when Nimrod tries to attempt to kill the child, Abraham, when he's born, that Terah actually gives a different child of a concubine to Nimrod instead of the baby when Nimrod demands the child. And he goes into hiding. So Abraham is going to be in hiding for about 10 years before he'll be able to come out again, and Nimrod will have kind of forgotten about the whole thing. But Terah gives Nimrod the concubine's child, and Nimrod actually takes the child and crushes its head, just throws it to the floor.
Kind of.
So,
we see, of course, and we like to
a Herod thing.
Yeah, the Herod thing, or like the Pharaoh in Moses' day. This seems to be a reoccurring pattern, and we like to think society is so much better than that, and yet we kill babies all the time.
Right.
I mean, it's a real thing. This idea that life is not valuable or threatened by life for our own convenience or whatever it might be. It's really unfortunate that we have a tendency to think, oh, how horrible, and yet we're horrible.
Right.
I mean, hopefully not us, but as a society, right, as a world.
So Abraham will come out of hiding when he's about 10 years old, and they will send him all the way around the Fertile Crescent to Shechem, where Noah and Shem or Melchizedek are. And he will actually, according to the Book of Jasher, he actually lives with Noah and his son Shem, learning the instruction of the Lord and his ways there for 39 years. And Abraham was in Noah's house 39 years, and Abraham knew the Lord from the time he was 3 years old, which is very interesting because we learned that Melchizedek or Shem also knew the Lord from the time he was young in the Joseph Smith translation, which we'll read in just a second. But it's just fascinating that in the Book of Jasher here, it says that an Adonizedek or Melchizedek, the king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem. So we have it in Jasher, we have it in Josephus, we have it in the Times and Seasons, published shortly after the martyrdom of Joseph Smith by John Taylor. We have it in many places. It's common knowledge by the rabbis that Shem is Melchizedek. And I wouldn't make a case to argue about that, but it doesn't really matter that much. But what I'm saying is there's plenty of sources that Shem and Melchizedek are the same person. But I do know some really good Bible scholars that don't think so. So, it's nothing ever to contend over. Here it is published in the Lectures on Faith that was published by John Widsoe, and he's included that quote. After the Lectures on Faith, he's included that quote from John Taylor right there, claiming Shem is Melchizedek as well. All right, and then we're going to get...
And it totally makes sense, because I've sit down and laid out their lives.
Right.
And the overlap is all there.
Right, and some of the arguments that they use that Shem is not Melchizedek, it will be that, well, Melchizedek's priesthood is without father or son, and we have no genealogy for Melchizedek, but we do have a genealogy for Shem. But it's kind of a catch-22, because that same argument could be, well, Melchizedek doesn't have a genealogy, Shem does, so maybe they're the same person, so you
maybe
can
it was
argue,
redundant.
You can argue it either way, and that's the point, is that you would never want to argue about it. But I think there is plenty of evidence that Shem and Melchizedek are probably the same person.
Well, technically we shouldn't argue, but at the same time,
right,
I don't mind pushing a point with that one.
So in chapter 15, you have the Lord, after this battle where Abraham and his have all gone and risked their lives again, and have not only been blessed that they defeat all odds and have won the battle with the four kings and they have rescued everybody, but he refuses to take more than he needs of the spoils and everything, lest they say that they made Abraham rich instead of God had blessed him. And so he refuses that. And the Lord at this point is going to make a covenant with him in
faith?
chapter 15. Yeah. Especially during famine, right?
Yeah, what faith? I mean, I could learn from him.
Yeah. So at this point, the Lord is going to do something that is, I refer to it as a covenant between the pieces. And if we look at it, because we're so unfamiliar with animal sacrifice, and if you read in the Book of Jasher, he didn't lay the animals out on the ground. He built an altar, and this was an offering to the Lord in the idea of a burnt offering, okay? But the pieces of the animals were divided in half. And then under these covenant terms, and by the way, all of the different animals in the ancient sacrificial system, bulls represented like high priests and all of Israel as a nation, okay? And rams would represent your next category of leaders, and then your sheep and your goats were representatives of the common people in Israel, and then of course your birds would be the poor. And so here when Abraham is offering all of these different animals, this is representing everyone, all the different peoples. And here in this offering, what would happen is in this covenant making process, well, number one, you can't make a covenant in Hebrew. You have to cut a covenant in Hebrew. So number one, in you look at the story and you see that Abraham is asleep. He's in a deep sleep. As a matter of fact, he's going to have a bad nightmare, and this is all like in the grove when Joseph Smith prays to the Lord, and he gets the darkness first, and the same thing that we saw with Moses, and here we have the same thing happening with Abraham, that before he gets the blessing, he has this difficulty thing, that this darkness, and he is in a deep sleep. And then it says that it's a horror to him, because what he's going to see in this deep sleep is that his children and his posterity are going to be taken captive. They're going to be taken into slavery for some 400 years. And so this is going to be heavy on his heart, and it's going to be difficult. And what happens at this point while Abraham is sleeping, and this is really critical that we understand that this is not a bilateral covenant where if you do this, then God will do this. Okay? This is what's called a unilateral covenant. And an example, you have any ideas of an example of a unilateral covenant?
You talking like the atonement?
Like the atonement, and Jesus says so often that he treads the winepress alone. Okay? We might think a unilateral covenant example would be like a will. Okay? In the process of a covenant that's a will, you have one person that's making all the terms, right? But the other person doesn't have any say whatsoever of the terms.
But
okay?
they are the beneficiary.
They're the beneficiary, but it was the person that made the will that made the terms.
And they can, because it's theirs.
So
what they're offering
exactly
is theirs.
So this is a different kind of covenant than what we're used to. This is a unilateral covenant. This is a covenant that God makes himself. And you know that because Abraham is asleep. But what they did in the covenant between the pieces is that the person making the covenant would walk between the pieces. And they actually, you can see on the slide here, they walked in a figure 8. And this figure 8 would mean that what if they didn't keep their part of the covenant.
Forgive me for just jumping in there at that point. It's interesting that is the sign for eternity.
Oh, it is. I never even thought about that. Wow.
So it's an infinite covenant.
But what we see in Genesis 15 is that a flaming torch is so God himself is going to make this covenant. And it has nothing to do with Abraham. It is a covenant that God himself promises that he will do. And the idea with these covenants, yes, the idea with these covenants is that if you didn't keep your part of the covenant, then you would get the curses. You would be like slaughtered, like these animals were there. Okay? All right. And what we need to realize that is also in Hebrew, there's no such thing as making a covenant. You can't make a covenant. In Hebrew, the word is charat, and it means right there when it says that you made a covenant, that he cut a covenant. So the reason that this is so important, this covenant between the pieces, that the fact that we have to cut a covenant is because what it's saying is that when you make a covenant, there's blessings involved and there's cursings involved. And that just as you have the potential to have power in priesthood and blessing from this covenant, you also have the potential to go backwards. And it is a covenant between the two. It's the choice of the two ways. Which way will we choose? And here are some examples of covenants between the pieces in the Old Testament. You have the parting of the Red Sea, and they walk between the two pieces. Okay, blessings on the right, curses on the left is what you're going to see when they enter the promised land. You have Joshua crossing the Jordan, and again, it parts and they walk through. And they make a testimony of stones that they have made a covenant as they walk through the river at that point. And then when Joshua enters the promised land at Shechem, they actually have the priests stand on Mount Ebal, and then other priests stand on Mount Gerizim. And as Israel is going between the two, they're calling out the curses and the blessings. And we will see that again when we look at the book of Joshua. The Passover, when you walk between the door, that's a covenant between the pieces. You're walking through, okay? And circumcision was the same thing. It was a cutting of a covenant between the pieces that we will be devoted to our God and our children. Okay, so these are Old Testament covenants between the pieces. Now, this one are some New Testament covenants between the pieces. Do you realize when we take the sacrament, that bread is broken? Do we realize that when the veil was parted at the atonement of Jesus Christ, that we were able to walk through into the presence of God through the blood of Jesus Christ? And we have the sacrament, and even the Jews themselves, they are still under the old covenant because they haven't received the new covenant right yet. And so they still But when Jesus descends on the Mount of Olives and the mountain breaks, what does it say they do?
Well, my mind was elsewhere.
Yeah, they just go between. Yeah. That's when they make the new covenant. It's right there.
It's like when we were on our way here and we were talking. God doesn't take our agency ever. He's not going to save us if we don't agree to be saved. And so what I'm saying in that regard, you can't, even if it's a grant covenant where you don't have to do anything but receive it, you do have to make the decision to receive it. And at the end of the millennium, even those who don't necessarily qualify at a celestial level still have to bow the knee and receive
the atonement
of Christ.
Right.
That's a minimum level that we have to receive in order to be resurrected and be qualified. Well, not necessarily be resurrected, but in order to qualify, you have to receive.
You have to receive it. And I don't want to use the wrong terminology here. There is a little bit of a difference between a unilateral covenant and a covenant of grant. Covenant of grant is usually a blessing that's a reward for being faithful. And so, but the unilateral ones are made by the Lord himself, whether we're faithful or not, right?
Yes, but still, to partake of certain portions of God's covenants with us, we do have to agree to receive.
Always. We have to receive. All right. And then this one's probably the one we're most familiar with. This is a covenant between the pieces too. Your body actually parts the water, and we go down in the parting, and then we rise again as a type of coming forth in new life in Christ there. So we are kind of familiar with the covenant between the pieces. And then what we want to do right now is just have you take a look at the fact that all covenants that are made sure and kind of moved up to the next level of promise are based on passing some sort of test. And this is all throughout Scripture. This is a chart in the book Isaiah Illustrated, and in the millennial day, there is a new covenant established that has all the parts of all the old covenants in the new millennial covenant. And you can see this, the Noachian covenant. What we had is that covenant promise. Oh my gosh, everybody's got to read the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis chapter 9, where we get the real covenant of the rainbow right there. And it was made after Noah had proved faithful. And you guys probably learned this on the last time, but Hiram Andrus in his book Principles of Perfection quotes George Walker's journal, where he says that Joseph Smith taught them that Noah was mobbed and attacked in the construction of the ark 4 times. And so they all have to pass these tests of being faithful and tests of ministering, even at the risk of their own lives. And then you have, of course, the Abrahamic covenant being given here in the covenant between the pieces in Genesis 15, right after he successfully goes to battle and trusts in the Lord to deliver them, 318 of them, against these 4 armies. And they receive that blessing there. The Levitical covenant that you have with Levi is made after they have proven faithful during the plagues and the golden calf and everything. Yeah. In the Davidic covenant, it's after he has proven faithful in all things. Saul delivered right into his hands, and he will not. Even though he's tried to take his life so many times, he will not lift his hand against the anointed king. And David passed unbelievable tests before he has the one that we all know about that he didn't pass. But Joseph Smith says that the Lord will not leave his soul in hell. In Isaiah, in the end time prophetic covenants, the millennial covenants, it comes after the tribulation. It comes after the test at that point. So the made sure covenants, in some ways, we can't have our calling and election made sure without that test. As a people, Zion has to be proven in the furnace of affliction, according to the scriptures.
Too often we want to avoid the descent. I know in my life, there's many times I've whined a little because of the descent phase of things. But the Lord has taught me very clearly now that descent is necessary to make a new creation in us.
Yes.
And so we have to be willing.
And we have to lay down the old to receive the new.
Yeah. It's definitely a pattern of baptism of all things, so that you have to allow yourself to be putty in the master's hand, or
Yes.
pliable in the
And to
master's
trust
hand.
him, even in the trials.
Even when it hurts.
All right, and here you can see the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant, and the reason we put this one up here so that you can see then in Isaiah 54, which is part of the Isaiah chapters that Jesus quotes in 3rd Nephi, you have all of these covenant blessings coming together, and they're itemized and spelled out so that you can see them all. Oh, look, this is the Levitical promises coming in Isaiah. This is the Abrahamic ones. This is all these grand covenant promises and blessings are coming to fruition in this end time scenario. And Isaiah actually does covenant structures with that, and you can see them all in these charts and in the book Isaiah Illustrated. So at this point, go through this really quickly. We've kind of gone through them a little bit, but according to the rabbis, there is no one that has passed more trials and suffered more than Father Abraham. And they have what they call the 10 trials of Abraham, the rejection of the idol worship of his fathers. And when he rejects that, the persecution that is going to come down on him from Nimrod.
Usually goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and that, we have that in the facsimiles, and we have other stories in the Book of Jasher, and then we have him leaving his homeland. Some of us would think that would be tough, to leave your homeland. It probably helped that Nimrod was trying to kill him, get out of Dodge, but leaving your other family, that would be hard. Right. The test of the famine. I mean, over and over and over, you see that Abraham is on the move, and we forget that he's not by himself. It's not just him and Sarah. It's 308 some odd converts and their families from Haran, and it's a large.
I was going to say a community. Really.
Yeah, and then dealing with Sarah, having to risk his wife being taken from him, and multiple times in the scriptures, the being forced into the war to rescue Lot, and the dreadful vision. I mean, the fact that he knew that his descendants would suffer before they would be blessed when they came out of Egypt in the Passover. And then one of the trials was circumcision at 99 years old. I mean, that's nothing. Yeah, it's getting a little personal here. But it was a token of the covenant that they would be devoted to the Lord. And there's all kinds of amazing stuff about being 8 days old, and that was the perfect time for the blood to be clotting, and like how did Abraham know all this? But no, the Lord knew this. But after the trial and the ordeal of the circumcision, by the way, that's when his covenant is going to be renewed again at that point. And we'll talk more about that one in just a second. But the family problems. I mean, the barrenness of Sarah, and then the contention between Hagar and Sarah. And what you have there is you have a rivalry of authority going on there that's the same as the rivalry between Nimrod and the Pharaoh.
Of the birthright.
Right.
That keeps reoccurring through the next generations.
Absolutely.
Actually. Yeah.
And Hugh Nibley does a great job in his lectures on the Pearl of Great Price. Of course, he does a great job. But he shows that almost everything that Abraham and Sarah experience is a conflict between those trying to imitate the priesthood and claim authority that do not have it with those who have the true authority from the Lord. And we'll read that. We didn't read that about Melchizedek. We'll have to go and read it right after this slide. So we have then, of course, the ultimate sacrifice, in what's called the Akedah. We call it the sacrifice. It really isn't a sacrifice because it is an aborted sacrifice. Isaac is not sacrificed, but in Hebrew it's called the Akedah, which is the offering of Isaac.
Spiritually,
the willingness.
The spiritually it was done.
Yes, absolutely. All right, and then of course we want to mention while we're here on the test of circumcision that today we are required to give a broken heart and a contrite spirit. That it is no longer required. Paul wrote that neither circumcision nor uncircumcision matters, only that we keep the commandments of God. And I think it's fascinating because I think it's really easy for us to think that we have a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And yet, Ether in chapter 4 says that Gentiles, I want to show you the greater things that are in the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon. But I can't because of your unbelief.
That's a little painful.
Do we believe? Do we have? And then we're told that, O house of Israel, all of these holy and great things, the Father wants to make these things known unto you, but he can't because of our unbelief. That right now in our nation, in this time right now, there's a veil of darkness that we read in Moses 7, a veil of unbelief. Do you feel that? Do you feel it spreading?
Yeah.
But at this time it says that there will be a people that will come with a broken heart and a contrite spirit. Really quickly, before we go away from Melchizedek and the covenant between the pieces in chapter 15, we learn in the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis chapter 14, and you have this in your scriptures. It's just, they usually put the Joseph Smith translation in the footnotes, and in this case, Joseph Smith added so much about Melchizedek that it had to be put in an appendix. So if you don't know, go to the back, be in your Bible, past the index, past the Bible dictionary, and you'll get to what's called the excerpts that were too lengthy for inclusion in the footnotes. And so then you're going to go to Genesis chapter 14, and this is what Joseph Smith revealed to us about Melchizedek. And Melchizedek lifted up his voice and blessed Abram. Now Melchizedek was a man of faith who wrought righteousness. And when a child, just like Jasher said about Abram, when a child he feared God, and he stopped the mouths of lions and quenched the violence of fire. And thus, having been approved of God, he was ordained a high priest after the order of the covenant which God had made to Enoch. So there's that tie-in to the promises made to Enoch that we talked about in the Enoch lesson. It being after the order of the Son of God, which order came not by man, nor by the will of man, neither by father nor mother, neither by beginning of days or the end of years, but of God. And it was delivered unto men by the calling of his own voice.
So we're talking calling and election.
Walking and talking with God, yes. According to his own will, unto as many as believed on his name. And we're back to that scripture in Moses, that in the end, the priesthood that was in the beginning will be there in the end days too. Walking and talking with God at the New Jerusalem. For God, having sworn unto Enoch and unto his seed with an oath by himself. So we're about to see, after the offering of Isaac, that God is going to swear with an oath by himself to Abraham, that everyone being ordained after this order and calling should have power by faith to break mountains, to divide the seas, to dry up the waters, and to turn them out of their course, to put at defiance the armies of nations, to divide the earth and to break every band, to stand in the presence of God, and to do all things according to his will, according to his command. and subdue principalities and powers, and this by the will of the Son of God, which was from before the foundation of the world. And men having this faith came unto this order of God, were translated and taken up into heaven. And now Melchizedek was a priest of this order, wherefore he obtained peace in Salem, which is short for Jerusalem, Salem, and
precursor name.
Yeah, and was called the Prince of Peace. And his people wrought righteousness and obtained heaven, and sought for the city of Enoch, which God had before taken, separating it from the earth, having reserved it unto the latter days, or to the end of the world. That's the exciting part. And hath said and sworn with an oath. So here is that covenant made sure again, that the heavens and the earth should come together, and the sons of God should be tried as by fire in the end time. So we had Noah and the Noachian covenant established after the flood of water. And in the end time, the millennial covenant, the new covenant in Isaiah, is established after the flood of fire. And this Melchizedek, having established righteousness, was called the King of Heaven by his people, or in other words, the King of Peace. And he lifted up his voice, and he blessed Abraham, being the high priest and the keeper of the storehouse of God, him whom God had appointed to receive tithes for the poor. Wherefore Abraham paid unto him tithes of all that he had, and of all the riches which he possessed, which God had given him more than that which he needed. And it came to pass that God blessed Abraham and gave unto him riches and honor and lands for an everlasting possession that he never possessed in his lifetime. But he knew it would be an everlasting possession, according to the covenant which he had made, and according to the blessing wherewith Melchizedek, or his father figure for so many
Spiritual
years,
father,
Shem, had given him. So that is an amazing tie-in between Melchizedek and Enoch and Abraham. And after this covenant of circumcision, in chapter 17, the Lord is going to change their names.
In the stillness where echoes meet, the past whispers and dreams repeat. A gentle hand, a guiding light. In the shadows we'll find our sight. Remember the path of old, shadows woven and stories told. For I am God with hands that weave the fabric of time. The heart believes. None chemistry, each moment a mile. The sacred rhythm of life's embrace. We dance through time in this timeless space. Wait for the dawn, the promise within. Through valleys low, we triumph again. Remember the former things.